Okay, so tonight we're just looking at one verse, and that is the first verse of Hebrews chapter 11. So, without any further ado, perhaps Paul, would you just read that for us? Thanks.
Sure. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
Brilliant. So there it is. One verse only tonight. And the reason I thought we'd look at this verse in some depth is because it's the go-to verse that Christians wanting to find a definition of faith will refer to, and then the rest of chapter 11 is about examples of that faith in action. But if I were to ask you, what is faith? Could you answer that question? Because there are so many different definitions of it. I mean, if you go to a dictionary, you'll find it can vary from a belief where you have absolutely no evidence or proof, but you believe it, to a more concrete sense of belief in something because you trust that person maybe, or you come to a conclusion based on some amount of evidence. Not that faith is proof. There's always going to be an element of belief in there. But nevertheless, faith as defined by the dictionary is very different, we're about to discover, to faith that is defined by the Bible. Okay? And that's why really I wanted to look at this tonight. Now, of the many translations that we have available to us, I have to say my favourite on faith happens to be this one, and we'll see why in a minute. Firstly, I'd just like to remind everybody of the Greek. Do you remember the Greek for faith, which is pistis, and the Hebrew word, which is, well, I don't know how you pronounce this, but let's go for emunah, E-M-U-N-A-H. Okay. And it is interesting, actually, when you look at the Hebrew, because unlike the Greek, the Hebrew seems to carry a bit more semantic, what they call semantic, or I'm trying not to be convoluted here. There are basically that faith in Hebrew, okay, carries a greater sense of activity, of action, and of doing than maybe the Greek word that we have here in Hebrews. And that is interesting, I think, because whilst the strict definition of faith in the Greek that we read in verse 1 tonight might well be belief, what we're going to find out as we go on through this chapter is that no, actually faith here in Hebrews is just like the faith that those Hebrews of old had to have, which is that it involved activity, it involved obedience, it involved doing stuff. That's why this semantic range of the Hebrew word allows other translations like faithfulness, loyalty, steadfastness, persistence, you see, all in the same word. Okay. Now, I think a good example of this, because I'm not doing very well at explaining it, so where better to go than the Bible itself, of this word in action, in the Hebrew that is Exodus chapter 17. Exodus, yeah, 17.
I've got my hearing aid
Oh, right. Okay, so we're going from verse 9, and just to give you some background, this is the battle for Amalek, and the Israelites are going to go in, hopefully and successfully win the battle. So in preparation, from verse 9, and Moses said unto Joshua, choose us out men, and go out, fight with Amalek, or the Amalekites, tomorrow. I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said to him, and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to pass, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone, and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the other side, and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And of course, battle was won. Okay. Don't ask me why. Why? Okay, I don't know why. I'm sure that's a very interesting study in itself. But I think this is a really good example of faith. Now, why so? Because the word faith, the same Hebrew word, is used in verse 12 and translated as steady. His hands were steady until the going down of the sun, or faithful. So there he was, willingly going up to the top of the mountain. Yet he wants the Lord to win the day, win the battle, okay? Lifts up his hands, all right? But he can't do it himself. He can't do it. So along come Aaron and Hur, and they hold them up in faithfulness, okay? And they're steady until the battle is won. And I think that's a good example. Steady, again, is this word for faithful. A good example of what faith is. There's a danger, I think, with Hebrews 11 verse 1, to go a little bit too subjective about this and think about what's happening in the interior. What does it mean to be faithful from within? But actually, there's a big debate about Hebrews 11 verse 1. All right? And the debate is this a verse that explains faith objectively, or is it a verse that explains faith subjectively? Now, I go for the objectively, and the King James translators go for the objectively too. In other words, instead of trying to look within and see, well, what does faith look like from within here? How should it be? Is it a trust? Is it a kind of... No, what you do is step outside and look at what God-given faith is. All right? And then wonder at the fact that you don't need to worry about getting that faith, because somehow mustering it up from within yourself. No, that faith is a gift from God. See the difference? Because sometimes we worry about, I need to be faithful, or I need more faith. Well, help me out. Remember who? I can't remember now. Said to Jesus, and where I need faith. And that is exactly how we need to take this. We're going to see some great examples of faithfulness, but we mustn't be overwhelmed and think, oh, well, I can't be like that. Well, actually, you can, because faith is a gift, and tonight we're going to look at what it is that God can give you, okay, if you're struggling with not enough faith. So, the first thing you'll notice of this God-given faith, this objective description in Hebrews 11, is that it is the substance of things hoped for. The substance of things hoped for. Alright? Now, that word substance, hypostasis, or sometimes you can pronounce Greek when it's a Y, it can be a U as well, or hypostasis. Depends on how you like to pronounce it, but whatever the case, it's hypostasis, and that may or may not put you in mind of a theology class that we've had in the past about the hypostatic union. The hypostatic union. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
No? There's a no over here. The hypostatic union is simply that Jesus had a human nature and a divine nature. Jesus had a human nature and a divine nature. And that is the union when he became incarnate. Okay, he remained having those two natures, and yet he was one person. Now, what has this got to do with faith being the substance, or the somehow the nature of, or the essence of things hoped for? Well, Hebrews chapter 1 verse 3. This is of Christ, and it says, who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power, when he had by himself purged our sins, sat down on the right hand of the majesty on high. The same Greek word, this substance, this express image, the brightness of his glory, who was that? Jesus Christ was the substance there in the flesh of God. All right. That's why he could say, if you want to see the Father, well, look at me. Didn't you? Well, the actual expression is, he who has seen me has seen the Father. Now, in a rather circuitous way, what I'm trying to say is that he who possesses, just as he that has seen me has seen the Father is Christ, so he that possesses God-given faith sees with certainty and confidence the things hoped for. Do you see that? So, nobody had seen the Father, had they? No, nobody had seen the Father. But they had seen Christ, those disciples. And in that sense, they'd seen the Father. And similarly, if you're wondering about what your future is, what the wonder of Christianity is, of being in heaven, or rather the new heavens and the new earth, of the abundant life, if you want to know and experience what that is in its essence, then what you need is faith. Faith is that substance that can be given to you by God, or through Jesus Christ. It's more than a hunch, you say, faith. It's not just a probability that, what you hope for, you hope so. It's not good. Rather, it is hope for, because it will happen, and that faith that you have in your heart as a result of God's gift gives you that certainty that it shall come to pass. That's why the atheist can't understand it. Do you see how different that is to general, belief or the dictionary definition? It's the opposite of show me, then I'll believe. Notice, it's the opposite of show me, then I'll believe. Rather, it's I believe and now I see. Do you see the difference there? I believe and now I see. Faith is this wonderful, powerful package that can be given to you in your heart. And suddenly, the essence of life, the meaning of life, God, the angels, heaven, the eternal, is opened up to you. And you know it for certainty. You know it, that that it's true, that it's certain. You have utter confidence, 100%, no doubt. Do you see the difference? And that's the faith that we really want, isn't it? We don't want any kind of wishy-washy kind of, I'm not so sure. But actually that's what God can give you. It's supernatural. And of course, it can only be discerned, 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 4. 14 rather. 1 Corinthians 2:14. But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. It's the natural man who says, show me, then I'll believe. It's the spiritual man who says, I believe and now I see. Yeah, 'twas blind, but now I see. Sometimes the more radical militant atheist will say, oh, you believe in the tooth fairy, do you? Or you believe in Santa Claus, do you? You know, they make these ridiculous accusations. They level that we are stupid. But they don't get it, because this faith isn't from within, it is from without. Okay. They don't, you know, the tooth fairy, Santa Claus, neither of them allow us to partake of their nature or dwell incorporeally in our heart. Santa Claus doesn't, does he? I should hope not. And nor does the tooth fairy. Okay, but that's what God does, you see. And when he does that, obviously we have this brimming confidence. Certainly, I struggle at times to engage with people on the level of, here are the arguments for the existence of God, because I know he lives within my heart. It is as simple as that. It is, to use the posh term, phenomenological, okay, which means it's just interiorly, it's within, I know it, I've received it, I experience it, you know, and if that ain't good enough, then I'm sorry, I don't know what to do really, I can't prove it. You just have to go on the word of my testimony, and actually that's what generally the Bible tells us to do. We share our testimony, don't we? Well, we can get into apologetics, but the best way is the gospel and giving the testimony of how God took up residence in your heart, how you came to know the Lord. So that's one side of it. I hope that makes some sense, because it was a bit confusing, I realised that. But it is this substance, and the nature of faith, just like Jesus revealed the Father, the faith reveals all the divine truths that we need. It's all there. And if you're wavering, because that happens, it's understandable, we do go through that, but you know what? Ask for it. Don't try and conjure it up from within, but ask for it. I've had to do that, and you'll be surprised. Now, the other half of Hebrews chapter 11 is the evidence of things not seen. The evidence of things not seen. What? This surely is counterintuitive. Just think about that. Faith is evidence. What? Faith is evidence. I thought that you need evidence for faith. Yeah? Not faith is evidence. Do you see how completely upside down that sounds? Okay? Well, the answer is 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. Again, it's about the power of faith, that it is this gift, this fruit of the Spirit. and we're looking at it objectively. Now, we're not weird here. We're certainly not saying it's some force field, all right? Word of faith, that's where they get some of their ideas from this verse. Not at all. Absolutely not. That is a ghastly theology and a very dangerous one. I would say it's heretical. But rather, it's just about what God has on offer for you if you just ask for it. You know, like we experience God's love, and we experience God's peace. You can experience God's faith also. So, chapter 5 and verse 7, this is how it looks. For we walk by faith, not by sight. In other words, God-given faith gives us eyes to see. God-given faith gives us eyes to see. A realm that we didn't know exist yesterday, suddenly we see it. In all its, well, not in all its glory, that'll be to come, but in all its truth, we know. We just know by faith that there are these heavenly realities, although not seen. Faith changes our vision so that we can perceive them. Like I said, I once was blind, but now I see. And sometimes we call this seeing with eyes of faith. 1 Peter chapter 1 verses 8 and 9. This is what it looks like. Whom having not seen, ye love, in whom thou know you see him not, yet believing, you rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls. Look again at the power of this kind of faith, this God-given faith. You've not seen him with your literal eyes, but actually you have. You've experienced his love. You believe, even though he's not physically present in front of you, that you've not spoken to him as you might speak with another human. That is the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls. Now, I'm sure you can see that with that kind of meat, with that kind of depth, then the Christian walk, as hard as it can be at times, with all manner of difficulties and tribulations and trials that we go through, getting a bit of that faith in you is really going to help you, I think. It's going to give you the hope, and it's going to give you the perseverance and the faithfulness and the steadfastness that we talked of the Hebrew type of faith, which is no different to this type of faith, that will allow us to keep on walking, to endure to the end. And we're going to, in the coming weeks, see some great men and women of old who saw that through right to the end. I think faith is one of the quintessential virtues of the Christian life. And just remember that it is an incredible power to change you and maintain you. Change you and maintain you in the way. Okay, so I'm looking forward to the weeks ahead for a shot in the arm of faith.